So, pipelines. It is a service available from the Azure DevOps, and it helps us developers to have build and deployment activities automated. So it's a step to achieve the continuous integration and the continuous deployment practices. Actually, it is quite easy to set those pipelines up in the Azure DevOps, and here I am going to show how to do that. But to use it, I'm going to create a new repository just as an example, and I will call it test pipelines. And I'm going to initialize that repository with some random default README file, so it's not empty by default. So when we will create it, it will be present as a README file, as I said, but what is the most interesting part right now for us is that it is possible to click on this button, Setup Build, and it will ask us to create a new pipeline straight away. That's how we will get the default one. When you click on it, it will ask how we want to configure the pipeline, if it's going to be a starter one or something like an existing pipeline file in the repository. But you should remember that it's empty now, it has only the README file. So we are going to click on the starter pipeline, and it will present us with a default starter pipeline with just a couple of scripts present in here. It's actually not what I wanted to show, because this one is quite empty. As you can see, it is, let me go through the starter pipeline one by one, and then we will have it updated just slightly. So first of all, there is a trigger keyword, and it means that this pipeline will be triggered on every commit into the main branch. Then the pull one, it means that all of the following steps will be executed under this virtual image with the Ubuntu latest tag. And right now we are using the agents that are provided by Microsoft. You can set up different versions of the images that you want to run. It could be Ubuntu, it can be Linux, or Windows machines, and so on, and you can specify what kind of machine you want to run it on. And then the steps, it's running a single job with a couple of scripts inside of it. I'm going to update this pipeline just slightly, and this is the updated version. It is still running on each commit to main, and I'm still going to run that under the Ubuntu virtual machine. But then the interesting bit is that actually the way how those pipelines are structured. And the topmost items that you can have are those different stages, and the stages is a way to group your jobs that you want to run into more logical sections. And those stages quite often, at least in my experience, they would be, the very first one would be the stage to build and test your application, and the second stage will be to deploy to your dev environment, then the next one would be to deploy to QA environment, and so on. And obviously you could have different ones, but it's a way to logically structure those. The interesting bit about those stages is that by default, stages depend on each other, and if you haven't specified anything, so I will open them again. Right now I have stages with just jobs, and that's it. No other things defined. They will be dependent on each other, and the stage deploy is dependent on stage build, and it's not going to start and try to do something before the first stage successfully completed. Then the next logical separation is jobs. And here I have two example jobs under the build stage. The first one would be to build the application, and the second job could be to run some tests based on the output of your build job. But in my example over here, I'm going to just run scripts that would echo something into the console, and that's it. Nothing more, so no real builds or tests, or no real deployments. The interesting bit about jobs is that in contrary to stages, by default, those jobs are actually executed in parallel, and it is actually just a limiting factor of how much money you're going to pay to Azure in terms of how many jobs can be run in parallel. For free, you can have only a single job run in parallel, but the order is not guaranteed. So if you have just build and test jobs and haven't specified anything, it is quite possible that the test job will be executed first and only then the build job, which might lead to incorrect results, obviously. In order to fix it, you need to specify that the test job actually depends on the build job. In that case, it is going to wait for the first job to successfully finish, and if the build job for some reason fails, so you cannot output anything or you cannot complete the build process, the test job is not going to be executed. And finally, for the build job, I'm going to use this one as an example here. The next logical step, how can you split your process of building your application? It's those different steps. You can have different steps defined here, and they have different names. You can have in assistance how many of those are available, and on top of that it is possible to download additional plugins, and that's what we are going to do in a little while for our infrastructure and for the front-end deployment jobs. But as I said, right now I'm just running a couple of scripts, and the only different one would be the task to publish pipeline artifacts. Here I am saving some text file into the result.txt file, result.txt, and later on I am publishing as a pipeline artifact. The good example how it's going to be used in future is that if it is a Terraform build pipeline, then you are going to prepare the plan for your infrastructure, and you probably will save it into the output, and then you can reuse the same plan that was validated and verified by someone to run it against the actual environment. Speaking about environments, the deployment stage over here for me, it is a special type of it is using a special type of job that is a deployment job. So you can see over here the jobs, it has the deployment name, and I am going to deploy it to the test environment. The environment, it's a way to track your applications and your changes in the Azure DevOps, and it doesn't really have anything to be linked to your actual environments, but it's really convenient to at least name them accordingly. And the final thing that I wanted to highlight and speak in terms of the pipelines and how you can write them over here is that inside the pipelines there are a lot of pre-built and predefined variables that you can use. And here I am using one of them, the build ID, build.build.id. It is very helpful to have some sort of a way to identify what is the build ID, and imagine that you are running your pipeline and you want to build the image. As you know, the usage of the latest tag is not really a good practice, and that is a way to overcome it. So basically you will have a unique identifier for each of your builds, and therefore you can use it to uniquely identify what is the build ID and what is the name of the image that you are going to use. I'm going to link this page from Microsoft documentation in terms of what are the available names of the variables, and there is a number of them that you can use, and they can be useful in one way or another. But build ID or build number, they are quite similar in use, can be used for that purpose, and also there are some variables for the location. So what is the default working location for the agent? That one is helpful as well. So after I will click save and run, it will ask me if I want to commit this change to my newly created repository, and I'm going to commit directly to main branch. And when I click it, it will create a new pipeline for me, and it will show it that way. So basically, in this view, I have two stages as I defined, the build stage and the deploy stage. It is possible to click on that expand or collapse button to show what are the stages and what is the progress. And even more so, when you click on the actual build, it will show what is going on and what is happening. So in the build stage, first I run some multi-line script where I just echo something into the terminal. Then I'm kinda doing the actual work, which is just to output this build output into that file. And finally, I'm publishing this file as a pipeline artifact. After that, it is immediately jumps into the testing phase, and in the testing phase, I'm running some tests, so basically saying hello world from the test stage. And after that first stage is finished, it's going to run the deployment stage. Right now, it's actually going to wait because it is the very first time when I created this environment, so this pipeline doesn't have permissions to access the resources for the test environment, and this is a way to control who and how can run the deployment. But basically, until I allow this, so until I grant this permission, the pipeline cannot be continued. So it's once again very easy to do when you have enough permissions yourself as a user who runs the Azure DevOps. So you click on the permit, and basically it will confirm that I want to allow that pipeline to make changes to the test environment. When I say so, the permission will be granted and the next stage will be automatically executed. And in the deploy to test stage, first it will wait for the agent to be available, and when that agent is ready for me, it will run the tasks that were defined in the pipeline. Here is an interesting output. If you remember from the YAML file that is describing what the pipeline should do, this one, that number 22, it's a build ID that I used as a variable, and you can see it over here in the URL. The build ID is 22, and when you click on pipelines, in that test pipelines, by default, actually it is named exactly as a repository from where it was created. You can see in a link, so on the bottom left corner of my screen, the build ID is 22. So once again, that is a unique identifier of this build. And then if we go to environments under the pipelines, you can see that there was a deployment that was run by this pipeline, and it was deployed to this environment, and you can click through to get to the actual pipeline that done some changes to the resources, technically speaking. There is one gotcha that I wanted to highlight as well, that by default, if you just created the Azure DevOps project and haven't done anything yet, then you might see a error, and this error is indicated by this no hosted parallelism exception that I have. And here you can see that I have a pipeline created, and the result is failed. It didn't run as expected, and the error message is no hosted parallelism has been purchased or granted. To request it, please fill out the following form, and you can copy this and do that request. Unfortunately, that's a way for Microsoft to limit number of jobs that it runs, and somehow control who can run those agents and not allow anything, and by default no actual pipeline will be executed. So this one, I will show you the content of this pipeline. When you go to pipeline, you can click on edit. You can see that this one is the exact copy or exact startup pipeline without any changes, and still it was failing. After you request this extension to have at least one job to run in parallel, you should be able to rerun this pipeline, and it will be completely fine without any changes. But I'm not going to do it right now. Another thing that I wanted to show about the pipelines is in my test pipelines repository. As you can see, we still have the single Azure Pipelines YAML file. It's the only one that has this pipeline. But it is still possible to create a new file, and let's call it second pipeline YAML, and I will paste the starter pipeline from hosted parallelism exception one and commit it straight into mine once again. Now if we go to pipelines, you will see that the test pipeline just started because I added the second pipeline, but it is running the same code as before and nothing really changed. It is possible to have more than one pipeline defined in a single repository, and in order to create a new one, you click on new pipeline and select where the definition for that pipeline lives. And for me, it's in Azure repos, so you saw it in the test pipeline, and it can ask me once again if it is a starter pipeline and I want to create a new one, or if it is an existing one. I'm going to select that it is an existing one in that case, and I can select from any of the YAML files defined in that repository what would be the definition for the pipeline. And if I will select the second pipeline, I can continue and save and run it. Once again, when I did it that way, you can see that it tried to use the repository name as the names for the pipeline, but because it's already existing, it's adding one in brackets, but it is possible to rename this repository and even this pipeline, and even more, it is possible to structure them into folders. So let's call it the second and move it to the folder test. Then you can do the same one with the test pipeline and just move it to the folder test. You can see that over here on that screen there are no changes, just the name of the pipeline, because it's recent pipelines. If we go to all, then they will be nicely structured by folders, and if you expand it, you can see what is happening inside each of those. And the second one, it's quite easy to finish because it's just two scripts to run, and the first pipeline that we added, it is still trying to, it's actually just finished the deployment to test.